Hello and welcome to another amazing episode of Creative Appetite. Today I'm joined by my really good friend Jimbo Barton. He is a producer slash sound engineer and has worked with basically every single major band of the generation that my parents are from, and I am very fortunate enough to have you come on, and I'm super excited.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you for having me, man.
It's been a long time coming, and with everything like work and life and things like that, you know, that takes its toll. But we are here, and I feel like we're gonna get real deep because I got a lot of questions to pick your brain about.
Okay.
So first off, let's
maybe if you ask me about the dead ones, I can slag on them.
How about we just go to the start? Let's go right back to when this all kicked off for you. Where were you? How did it kind of come about?
I was living in Melbourne as a very young musician. I played drums and I realized pretty quickly that I sucked at it. But I really knew what a good drum sound was.
I think we're going to have to bring this a little bit closer. Just so I can pick. Or actually what we can do is we can undo it and you can just hold it and then you can sit back.
Yeah, that's okay. I'll sit on it.
All right.
Yeah, so I started working in a studio in Melbourne owned by, a god at the time for me, a guy called Bill Armstrong and Roger Savage. And Roger Savage found it in his heart to take me in and train me at almost everything. So, excuse me, I went from 3-piece bands to 110-piece orchestras and everything in between. And I did that for about 5 or 6 years. And that was the beginning. I did all those early 80s Mushroom Records bands, Mondo Rock and Jojo Zepp and the Falcons and the Sports and Hunters and Collectors and a bunch of guys that, were pretty much my age as well at the time. And I don't know, do you want me to go on from there?
You just keep, this is your floor. I feel like you could just go on for days, so I'm going to let you run it.
Yeah, so I got to the point where I thought, well, this is kind of a bummer. I'm 21, 22, and I've worked with the biggest bands in Australia, and I was usually on the second album or the third album for a lot of them, and I just thought, wow, is this it? Is this what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? And I had done a track for Men at Work, well, an album for Men at Work, but a track for Men at Work. The lead-off single was Who Can It Be Now?
Tune.
The tune.
It is a tune.
Yeah. And just after we got done with it, I think it was about 3 weeks, it was number one in the US. So suddenly I had an international profile. And I thought, wow, okay. So what happens now? I'm here. I'm waiting. And then I got a call from a guy in London called Peter Collins, who has a ridiculous track record. It's like him and Trevor Horn were the biggest producers in the UK. And he asked me if I'd come out, and a good friend of mine, who also lives back here now, Julian Mendelsohn, did Pet Shop Boys and God knows what else. He's, been around the traps, but he recommended me to Peter, and that was my move to the UK. I thought I'd be back in 5 weeks, and I just never came back.
It's so like, and it would have been such a different time to like before social media, before like phones. Like I'm sure like contacting someone, you'd either send a letter, like because it's international.
Oh man. My first freaking mobile phone, you had to bring in the back of a car.
Like driving in those
brick.
It's like it must be such a, do you ever have like moments where you just look back and go, the technology that I used to use to what I use now, like as we were talking about before, like you're now doing everything out of a bedroom, which is technically like a bedroom producer, like what these young kids are doing now, making electronic music.
Yeah.
But you used to be like in these old school, really, like I guess high tech for their time. Like we're talking about like the 80 channel mixer and stuff. Where now you just like smash everything. Do you ever have moments where you just sit back and be like, man, this is like the world has just evolved. Like it's so evolved now.
No, because I got to be honest with you, I've always been on top of it. So when changes came along, I rolled with the changes. I started, record companies started getting smaller budgets to do projects. And, I remember having a meeting one day with Jimmy Iovine and saying to him, Jimmy Iovine used to run, doesn't matter. He ran a label over there, and he said, Jimbo, we can't afford these budgets. What can we do? And I said, well, how about we rent a big luxurious house up in the hills above Malibu or Topanga Canyon, and we'll bring the gear in, rental gear, so the band can work all day and night, and they'll also sleep in the mansion that we rent. So you're not paying hotels, and all the gear is brought in. So that immediately cut our budgets in half. And I think in some ways I might have been responsible for the disappearance of the big studios, i.e. the record plant.
The innovator like coming and going, oh, this would be a really cool idea. And then you're like, oh, wait a second. Now the whole entire scene has shifted.
Yeah, the industry.
You're like, oh.
No one wants to, what? You made that album for $50,000?
How, yeah, like I guess that's another thing which is crazy, right? Like how most people I don't think understand how expensive it is probably to make an album, I guess back then. So what would be something like an album that was quite expensive? Because how does it work? Like does it become more expensive the harder it is to work with the artist? Like when they're not happy, they're like, nah, we're doing it again. And that slowly adds up like the bill.
No, because back in those days, you got hired for your expertise, so they didn't really come back and say, you were able to blow them away with what you were getting sonically and arrangement of the songs and, get rid of that pre-chorus there, we don't need that, and all that sort of stuff. So there was never really any crazy, comebacks from the bands, and you got hired by the band for what you could bring to the party. But it would, we'd spend, average album was about 4 months, and at $2,000 a day for the studio and hotel bills for the band, because they'd usually come into LA or New York or, wherever their biggest capital city was. So there were massive expenses, hire cars, hotels, per diems, meals, food, caterers.
That'd be probably terrorizing the streets as well.
Oh, yeah.
Being big bands, just coming running in.
They'd get out as soon as they could and go to the bar.
Did you ever see, I guess, so for context, for people that might not know who you are if they haven't checked your website, because I'd assume that a lot of people listening, I shouldn't assume, but a lot of my listeners I think are a bit younger than us.
What are you getting at?
What I'm saying is they might not understand. Your name is very popular over in America and things like that. So just for context for people, like you've worked with like bands like Metallica, Fleetwood Mac, Queen, Alicia Keys, Slipknot, Phil Collins, like I said, Crowded House. Like you've worked with quite an array of artists that are well and truly in the stratosphere of they're going to be around forever.
Yeah.
So like you must have seen some things because you were in the era where it was like the rock star lifestyle was quite prominent, I guess.
Right.
And how does it work for like yourself? Did you kind of get dragged into these parties? They're like,
no, not at all, actually. don't think I ever worked with a band I didn't get on with. And before you start an album with someone, you don't just walk in cold. You know, you go to a rehearsal space and do 3 or 4, 5 weeks rehearsal on the album, and you edit songs and change lyrics and do all kinds of things to give it the hit perspective,
the unique flavor.
Yeah, but I've always gotten on with the guys. So when they would come into the studio, they were very respectful, and I'm sure there were piss up nights and
The classic
tons of blow hanging around, but they never interfered with the creative process in the studios. They always took it outside the door, or
yeah, it's like because
I didn't have to do copious amounts of coke on the console or anything like that.
Yeah, like when I went into the studio with my friend, like I was mentioning before, you could see there was like this respect between the artist and the engineer.
Right.
And like you would never you wouldn't go in there and touch anything. You'd never you would just go in there and you're like, all right, this is what we kind of like want to achieve. And they're like, righto. And then it was like, you just respect the space. And if you ever want to do anything a little bit silly, like you said, you just leave and go outside.
Right. I mean, but we kind of took care of all of that. The whole idea of doing pre-production is that you work out what you're about to record, and that's done in a rehearsal room for pretty cheap. And then when you go into the studio, it's a matter of execution more than trying to work out what the album is. It's executing what you've done in pre-production.
Like kind of like refining it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you're like,
but
right.
like all the parts are worked out. If the drummer's got a hi-hat pattern in the verse, next time I hear that song, it better be the same hi-hat pattern. Don't go and change it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and you kind of have a global perspective on the songs. Like you know them intimately before you hit the studio. You know what we worked out in pre-production. You know where there's got to be a cymbal crash. You know where there's got to be, some funky little drum fill or.
So it's like very well orchestrated, I guess. In like the pre-production is like, all right, this is kind of your time if you want to muck around and like try a new feel or try this and try that.
That's where it all gets done.
And then it's like once we're going to the studio, it's like
this is
it. You got like 2 hours to lay this drum down and just do it. Kind of thing.
I mean, it's not quite that rigid. It is flexible, but for the most part, all of the work has been done in pre-production. So,
how did you? So I guess getting back to like when you were younger, like just starting out, because I remember we were talking about before we started recording. You were talking about, and it's like the old school mentality of like you start from the bottom, work your way up. How did you find that whole process as a young person, like starting to learn sounds and like?
Well, I loved it because the guy who taught me, Roger Savage, is a genius. Still for me to this day, the guy is a genius. He's moved into film now. He works a lot with Baz Luhrmann and the Hollywood set.
Baz Luhrmann's probably the only name that you've mentioned so far that I'm like, yeah, I think I know that one.
Yeah, right. But Roger, a beautiful man and a genius at audio. So I couldn't have had a better teachers. We didn't have these schools that you go to, these engineering schools or audio schools. There was nothing like that existed. So I take my hat off to Rog. Thank you, buddy.
When you do say genius, I've always wondered, because for the most part, the general population probably wouldn't really understand what you mean by genius. So like on maybe a bit more of like a technical term.
Okay, well, Roger was the kind of guy that he might be going to do an acoustic guitar overdub, but he couldn't be fucked getting up and going to move a mic. But there's a microphone on the piano, on the grand piano, right next door to where this guy's recording his acoustic, and Roger would EQ the piano microphone to the acoustics sound like it was up in your face.
That's crazy.
It always fascinated me, in the early days, how he did that. Obviously, finally I learned, but
It's like work smarter, not harder kind of situation.
Yeah, just the fact that he knew how to do that, it just blew my mind. Or to sit in front of a 110-piece orchestra when I first started with Roger and watch him do his voodoo, and there's like 100 and something mics in the room. And you can't just place the mics wherever you want. They've all got to be facing in the same direction, or you get signal cancellation from phase. And it was all second nature to him. So as I learned and could actually hear what he was talking about, it was a massive revelation for me. I just thought, wow. So he is my genius.
So I've always been now that I have someone who's super obviously very talented in this field. Every time I go to like a hardcore concert or like a metal concert, it just doesn't sound good. It just sounds really cloud, like very muddy, like all the distortions are crossing over each other. It's really hard to hear the singer. I'm sure you probably understand what I'm talking about. Like, could you give a bit of clarification as to why? Because I just think, I'm like, man, that sound engineer just mustn't either know what he's doing or there's something bigger at play that I'm not qualified to understand.
There's a handful of guys around the world that are genius front of house guys, because it's very different to what I do. Excuse me. I have, I usually am sitting in a mobile truck backstage, and I get a split off the stage box, with stage boxes where all the microphones get plugged in, and I get a split off that box. So everything I receive out in the mobile truck is virgin sound. There's no EQ, there's no nothing. You just get
straight raw in it. Yeah, okay.
You get the raw microphones. And the front of house guy gets his raw microphones. So we have completely different splits. But, there's a guy called Big Mick who works for Metallica, and his front of house sound is pretty freaking special. It's pretty amazing. And that, there's a few people around that get it, and they can make a concert arena sound like you're listening to an album. I saw a Peter Gabriel concert in Paris once, and a friend of mine had got me a ticket and invited me to go. Man, when I sat down and heard that thing, it sounded like that record. I forget what the name of the record was. It was like Sledgehammer or something.
Oh, yeah.
And the live sound was so exactly like the recording that you bought on CD. I couldn't believe it. There was a drummer's name was Manu Katchu, and you could hear everything in his kit. And he had, quite an intricate drum kit, little bells and all sorts of things. But you could hear everything in the drum kit. And that to me was astounding. But there's only a handful of front of house guys that I've ever heard that can do that. It's really hard work.
Yeah, I could imagine. That's why I was so intrigued about it, because I would go to these concerts, even if they were just small ones. So obviously, a lot of these guys are probably just small time people, but they could never get it right. No. It always sounds like trash. It just sounds like someone's just gone in there, made a bunch of sounds, and it's just like there's no space between anything. It's just like everything's just crossing over and clashing. And I've always been fascinated as to why that is. And I was like, maybe it's just because there's so much distortion in heavy metal or like hardcore music
it doesn't have to be. I mean, most of my guitar recordings are done with one microphone. And I'll just exit stage right here for a second. But that's it.
That's
It's called an SM57, and I think I've owned this thing for about 42 years or something. But that's on all the Metallica cabs. It's on every amp. I use these all the time. Either these or a mic called 421s. So it's not, there's no rocket science. You really, really need to know what a good sound is and go get it.
Like hone into it. Like,
and just get good at it. That's your job. You've got one job. Get
the best
great sound.
So, getting back to you, so you just moved over to London. What was the first studio that you kind of like got into, and who was like the first band, like the first major band that you like overseas that you're like, all right, this is like kind of serious now?
The studio was a place called Psalm Studios, and it was run by a guy called Trevor Horn. He had two studios, Psalm East and Psalm West. And the guy I was working with, Peter Collins, never worked at any other studio except Psalm. So by default, Psalm Studios was the studio I lived in for 5 years or whatever. And it's a bit different in the UK. In America, you find a studio that you like Record Plant, and you book it for a year, and everything you do goes into that studio. You have a permanent lockout. No one can work in your room.
Yeah, right. So like at the start of the year, you just like go, all right, I'm here for this year.
Block book it for the year.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
But then do you have to make sure that you've got a full year of work? Or do you just kind of...
I was probably thick as mud and just, I booked it convinced I'd be working. And
no
it
chill,
it just kind of worked out that way. And the only time the room would free up, I used to, every time I finished a project, I'd take 2 weeks off. And at that point, I would let them, even though I'd paid for it, I'd let them resell it for, to someone else. So it's a bit of a bonus, a bit of a kickback to them as well. But it worked out really well for many, many years like that. And when you felt like you were part of the furniture and you needed to change, you would just swap studios and then go work somewhere else for a year. But usually once you'd gone, the people would say, come back, we miss you, come back. So you'd finish out the year at, the new studio and then go back and made sure you got, your croissants and coffee in the morning.
What does like a normal day look like for you going into, like, do you start at a certain time every morning, finish at a certain time? Like, cause I know like recordings can go quite long.
Well, I always used to, like starting work around 11 in the morning, between 10 and 11. But finish time was anyone's guess. Sometimes it was 6 a.m., sometimes it was 3 a.m., just depending on what was going on that day. But I was talking before about the pre-production thing, and so you have like a whiteboard, and you map out the whole project on this whiteboard, song titles, what's done, what's not done. And so you just stick to that, basically.
Yeah. It's because it's such like a niche thing to be involved in, like not a lot of people get to experience living in that kind of environment.
Right.
And especially when you're dealing with like high profile bands as well. Like you weren't recording with like low, like, you know what I mean? Like you're dealing with like bands that everyone knows. Like everyone knows who Metallica is.
Right.
Whether you like the music or not, you know who they are.
Yeah, sure.
Even Alicia Keys, like I saw that. So what's like, how do you find the difference? Is there any, or if there is any difference between working with like Metallica or Alicia Keys, considering they're from two completely different genres? Like, do you have to adjust?
No, you don't really. Obviously, to begin with, you need to have a wide palette and you don't just lock yourself into one genre. I never, would go and lock into 6 metal albums back to back. I'd do a Metallica project and then go and work with Kate Bush or Enya.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, right.
Is it White Flag? Is that the Enya song?
Orinoco Flow is the big Enya hit.
She
Sail Away, whatever.
She popped up and then she just disappeared, didn't? Or maybe she didn't.
I think most of us moved on.
Yeah, right.
That's probably what happened. But I find that you just have to mix it up, and you might be knee deep in a metal album, but I'll go home and listen to a Stevie Wonder record or anything that's completely different, a juxtaposition to what you're working on.
To get a bit of a gauge on kind of what other different sounds.
And plus, you can cross collateralize. I could do a Kate Bush record and take some things that I'd come across on a Kate Bush record and put it in a Metallica record, and vice versa. So
yeah, it's like broadening your horizons.
Yeah,
because
genres.
Without it, you're not going to be able to adapt and evolve to become like who you are today. Obviously,
right.
Which is well respected in the industry, kind of thing. And you could, I guess, even just in life in general, you have to go live a life, for lack of a better term, to become the person that you are. Because if you were to stay in the same town and live that
same genre, and
you're not experiencing.
No, you become stagnant. So I think for me it was a matter of moving countries, which I did quite a bit, and knowing when to take a period of time off. If you felt fatigued and like you didn't want to be there, it was time for vacation.
Yeah, I'd like to pick your brain on that one, because I'm kind of at the point at the moment with this. I've been working pretty hard this whole year, and I'm towards the end. So I've been nearly doing it for a year in December, and I'm already at 30. I'm at my 36. I think this is the 36th episode or something.
Right. Okay.
So but I'm starting to feel mentally fatigued. Just with the project as a whole, because there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes as well. Obviously.
Yeah.
To get here and stuff. And yeah, it'd be interesting to see your take on it, considering you, when you're listening to sound all the time and you're dealing with different personalities all the time. How do you manage taking a break? Is that just going on a vacation until you feel ready to come back?
Well, you speak with your manager, because I've always had a manager that ran things for me and booked projects and did all that. Excuse me. And then you just sort of let them know, I need a break. This is not working out for me. And the longest one I took a year off, and I moved to a place called the Azores, which is in the middle of the Atlantic. It's a Portuguese colony, but it's about 3.5 hours to New York and about the same to Europe.
So it's just a tiny set of islands or something?
Yeah, it's 9 islands in the middle of the Atlantic, but there's nothing goes on. It's kind of a bit the same as around here. There's dairy farmers, cheese makers.
People that just have no concern for they're just this is my job. I wake up in the morning, feed that cow, and then
exactly
the real simple living. Just don't overcomplicate it.
But amazing quality of food. So that I did that for a year, and I felt really good after I came back to work again.
You felt reinvigorated and
yeah.
And how did you find? I guess it might be a little bit different because you have a manager, but I'm always under the impression, for me, just from the way I was brought up and the work ethic side of things, and it's if you stop, it's everything you've just worked for is just disappeared.
Yeah,
and then you got to start again. And did you ever feel anything like that, or is it a little bit different with a manager because I guess they're constantly on your tail?
No, not really. I mean, once they've got you locked into a project, there's not really anything they have to do. Yeah, and they just start taking feelers for what you they think you might be interested in for the next project. But nah, I was always I have a pretty heavy work ethic, and once I start something, that's what I do. It's 24/7.
Just go until it's done.
Yeah, yeah. You go to bed thinking about it. You wake up thinking about it. So you might arrive at the studio in the morning and you've got 10 ideas that we should do. So.
It's a interesting, like, because I feel that maybe it's not. It's like more of like an obsession too. Like you're just so happy to be there all the time. Like everything's, it's like, man, this is like the best thing in the world.
Yeah, and it was for me. I got on really, really well with everyone I worked with. I never really had arguments with anybody. I'd if someone was pissed off, I'd ask them, dude, what's up? Is there something going on I need to know about? That are you not happy here? And usually they just turn around and say, well, look, I'm glad you asked because. I was like, okay, great. Let's not do it. Let's change it. Let's change it to another part.
Isn't that crazy that, like, just, I guess that moment that you just mentioned is like, even for now, like men's mental health and stuff where like guys don't talk about their feelings, but someone like of your generation as well, like you specifically, is like asking people, and then you're just saying exactly what they're trying to say right now. It's like, dude, if you just ask someone how they feel, I can tell you, like, majority of the time they will feel, they're like, oh shit, like someone's actually concerned, so then they're more inclined to open up.
Well, I could usually tell when people weren't feeling good about something. It's body language or whatever it is. And I just hit stop and say, what's up, man? What's going on?
Did you ever work with, so I watched a doco on Rick Rubin the other day, and his like practices, and I was like, oh, this is quite eclectic, I guess you could say. Like it seems pretty abnormal to the way that most people do it. But it does seem like he has quite the reputation in the hip hop industry. Did you ever cross paths with him?
Yeah, because I worked on a Red Hot Chili Peppers album called Californication.
Very well known.
Yeah.
I think.
And I worked on that for a little bit. And if he ever hears this podcast, he'll probably object to it. But I didn't really find him very talented. He used to, we'd start work at 11 with the Chili Peppers and we'd, record stuff all day long. And he'd come in at 7 o'clock and order Chinese food or whatever it was he wanted to eat. And he's a big boy.
He looks like a big bloke.
Yeah. And he'd lay on the couch and tell you everything that was wrong with what you were doing, but not really add any constructive criticism or.
Yeah, right.
So
interesting. I only because like I only brought him up because I was like, well, it was around the same. And I just watched the documentary. And they obviously it's a doco on him, so I'm sure no one's gonna be like, yeah, screw that guy.
Yeah,
it was just bizarre, like some of his practices and the way he'd like he built this like studio for Mac Miller, who's like one of my favorite artists. Oh, I didn't build it for him specifically, but it was like this oasis where he'd get artists to come out and just like be present in the moment in the recording process. Did you ever have any like practices like that with, obviously you're dealing with these big bands and stuff, because I feel like a sound engineer or producer like yourself must have something specific that people always come back and gravitate to. Like it might be a certain way that they handle things, because you seem like a very calm, cool, collected human. So that could be the reason. And you're obviously good at your job.
I've always gotten on really, really well with everyone I work with. When you're in the middle of it, you don't look at them like you're this massive rock star. We all piss in the same area, we eat in the same area, and you kind of forget, that they have this persona outside of the studio. Case in point, there was one day I was working with this band in New York, and I turned around to the singer and said, "Hey, Geddy, let's go get a sandwich." And he looked at me and laughed. And he said, "Are you crazy?" I said, "No, there's a sandwich bar around the corner that's really good. Great sandwiches. Why don't we go? And we can talk about it on the way, the part that we were working on." And I felt so bad because, we get out of the elevator at the studio and walk out in the street, and we're walking down the street. And I'm talking about, the part we're working on. And suddenly all these people, someone goes, "Oh my God, it's fucking good."
You're just like, oh shit, I didn't
Yeah,
forgot.
and you kind of forget, and you go, "Jesus, I can't believe I did this to him. It's really bad."
Yeah, it is. I could only imagine like that kind of level of fame too. But yeah, I was meaning more specifically in terms of like the way you, like when you're in the room working, because like you have a lot of people like continually come back, obviously, because you're really good at your job, but you're not doing anything like Rick Rubin style crazy where people are like,
No.
like you're just like, hey man,
No.
this is who I am.
We're
Super love my job.
We're there to make a great record.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Sorry, probably didn't clarify that correctly.
That's what we're doing. We're there to just make a really cool album.
Because it's funny when you hear like interviews when they talk about like sound engineers and producers, they're always like, man, this guy is a genius. Like he just, I don't know what it is. He's like, he can just hear this and hear that. So I'm always like, what is it that they're like referring to in that moment? Is it the way that they can like, I don't know, tune the drum a certain way to like get it to make a certain sound? Is it like the whole project together? Like they can just hear it and it's like make it. Because someone said something about Dr. Dre. He's quite good at like picking up sounds. Again, these are documentaries, so they're very biased. But
Right.
you watch them and you're like, obviously, you're like, oh, he must be good at what he's doing. And they were just talking about like the way he can like listen to sound, and he's very good at picking up certain sounds. So do you find that's the same with you? Like because you're in your bio, they talk more specifically about drum sounds. Like that's probably what you're most well known for, is like,
right.
And what is that, if you would explain to someone the drum sound, is it because you can get the warmth out of the drums themselves?
No, I think it was because I sucked as a drummer. So Jesus kind of afforded me the knowledge of how to get a great drum sound. You can't play it, but you can get a good sound. Si bene dica tutti.
That's what my friend said. So you'd like my friend. So Mitch Morrison, shout out to him. He's a friend that works with me behind the scenes. He listens to every episode, gives me good feedback and stuff.
Right.
But he said something similar. He was like, he was working in the BMX industry, and he's like, if you couldn't ride, you're taking the photos kind of situation.
Yeah, right.
He's like, so it's like, it seems funny because like you can't play the drums, but you can tune them. So that's what you're going to be doing. Like, so you're just like, oh man, like I have to
I always, obviously depending on the piece of music that you're recording, but what kind of drum sound would sound amazing behind this song. And so you go there and get it. And it doesn't take long. Some people spend a whole day getting a drum sound. I got about 25, 30 minutes, and I'm good to go. The Phil Collins thing in the air tonight was, not a day getting a drum sound. It was
did you record that?
I didn't record the song. I just got the drum sounds.
Right.
That massive.
Yeah. Because that is a big moment in that. So like that obviously is the moment of the song, right?
Right.
So you engineered that and like...
I got the sounds for the drums that they were going to use.
As in you found the kit?
He had the kit.
Yeah.
But it was at a place called Townhouse Studios in London. And they had this, above this one room, they had a massive big tunnel that went up 2 floors. And it had like 3 mics up in the things. And I asked the assistant, how do I get access to those microphones? And he said, you just plug them in here and plug them in there. And I said, okay, great. And the roadie went out and started banging on the drums, and, shock horror, a bit of compression on these room mics, and it sounded like go, 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 go,
Yeah, right. So that was recorded in that tunnel,
Yeah.
and you just layered the sounds on top from those mics.
Right, but you can turn those mics off, and you have a bone dry drum kit with no reverbs. No
So this like, so for anyone that knows that song, which everyone knows that song, when they're like feeling that power come through that drum set, that's literally because of a couple of mics that was sitting through it.
3 room mics up on the 2 floors up.
Like, because
I mean, you've still got to get a great drum sound.
Obviously.
You've got to have a fat drum sound.
There's a lot more to it, but
But when you turn those things off, there's that enormity.
I love those moments where they're so like you. I'm sure when you went in there, you're like, I wonder if you can like.
Yeah, I just looked up because the drum room wasn't that much bigger than this thing here.
Yeah, right. That to me is like the most. Like, I really enjoy like those moments where like someone explains something. You're like, oh, that's how they got that sound.
Yeah, right.
And it's like when you listen to psytrance, there's like so many intricate sounds, and like even a friend of mine, Jai, he's a singer, and I was asking him how he got his vocals, because it sounded like, you know, that, remember, obviously you remember, you know those mics that they were using back in the 70s, they're like silver, they kind of look similar to that, like got the runs across them.
Right, yeah.
And they had that real distorted kind of like vocal sound.
Mm.
I was asking him if he was using one of them.
Electro voice, I think.
Yeah, but he was like, no, I just layer my voice and then kind of like adjust it in there. And I was like, man, that's so... Because when you hear something, you're like, how the hell are they getting this particular sound? And that's what I find so intriguing and amazing about music and sound in general. How you can manipulate it to like make someone believe it's like something completely different than what it was.
You know, it's funny, like anything, really good singers can also know how to use a mic and how not to use a mic. And I worked with Kate Bush, and I used to go out to her. She had a studio on her parents' farm out in Kent, and she would go into the vocal booth to record a vocal, and you would have this massive sound on the microphone. And I'm looking around at all my outboard gear thinking, what am I doing to it? What? And I stopped and I said, Kate, how the hell are you doing? What are you doing there? She goes, oh, it's a bit of a copy of the townhouse room with the mics up high in the ceiling. And she would, on all her big loud notes, she would lean back so her voice threw up into the room, and those mics were coming into the console as well and being mixed down to one track. But she absolutely had it down. She was a genius at the sound on her vocal. And if you listen to her records, it's no smart-ass engineer in the background putting some effect on it. It's all her. That's just changing her, position on the mic, looking up in the air, looking down, and she's so got it down. She was a genius. She was great. I used a lot of compression and stuff like that. On the room mics, but when he walked back in, he was very happy. And I think it took me 3 hours or something, 2 or 3 hours.
Isn't that wild? Like 3 hours of you playing around with it to then changing many, many lives across the world.
But the bummer is, initially in our talk, he said, well, my roadie hits like I hit, it's going to sound pretty close. I've heard that story 1,000 times, but that was one of the biggest ones.
So when he come in and was mucking around,
and he comes in and sits at the kit and starts playing the kit, and he plays 10 times the volume of the roadie. So I had to quickly back down all the gains on the preamps.
Yeah, like that's the other thing, right? Like, like all these intricate details of that exactly.
But I finally, I did it. I got it going pretty quickly. Backed it all off, and because he's a hard hitter.
He sounds like he's trying to put his drumstick through the floor. Like that. That drum solo is intense.
I've still got one of his drumsticks around here somewhere.
Really?
From that session, yeah. I don't know where it is, but it's somewhere in a box. We've just moved in.
Yeah, like I had no idea. I was so oblivious, and that's so cool.
But I didn't record anything off that album. I just got drum sounds. That was my sole gig.
But like that, like the song is good. Don't get me
It's
wrong.
a great song, yeah.
But that drum solo is that song. Like
Yeah.
without that drum solo, it
Yeah.
is not. It's not what it is. Do you know?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that, because even like that solo has been used across different ads. Like Mike Tyson like did that.
Right.
It's been used in like the Hangover movie. They've
Yeah.
used it. Same
Yeah.
with Mike Tyson again.
Right.
I've seen it in other ads. Like just I can't remember the like companies that were using it. Like, do you know what I mean? Like that is it's timeless. It's a very timeless moment.
Yeah.
And you've like, this is like just blowing my mind. But
No,
I'm
it's
just
just
like
a little part of it. I just got the sound. I didn't record the record.
Oh, you might have, yeah, but like without you going, hey, can I just plug those mics in?
Yeah.
It could have sounded completely
Yeah.
different. Like, could have just been
Yeah,
like
right.
a shitty little. But it was like, because like to me, when I listen to that drum solo, I think it reminds me of like when you're watching an orchestra,
Right.
and there's like that big climactic moment where like the bass is going and everything's going. You can feel it in your chest. You're like, oh shit, this is on right now.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel about that drum solo, because you can
Yeah,
hear
right.
all the like the space. I don't know. To me, sound is like real visual, like the way I perceive, like the way I interpret it in my brain. And when I think about that drum solo, all I think about is this drum kit, and there's like all this space surrounding it, and there's just this big. It's like this big mushroom cloud, like you'd see on an atomic bomb when that drum goes off. It's just like, and then it's just like, you're like, oh, and then it's like the song's back in again. You're like, man, what the hell has just like happened between like the first half of the song and then this other half?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm just going on a tangent about that drum, but yeah, it's a big moment. And I was like, it's pretty. I just find it funny when you ask someone, they're like, oh no, it was actually just this. You're like, you think like what you perceive it to be is completely different to what it actually is. But I'm sure you've had many moments like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I've had a lot. I've had it's crazy shit that you're sitting around thinking, wow, how can I make this different and really just completely different sounding. I've wheeled in farm machinery and set it up in a room, like wheelbarrows and hoes and saws and stuff like that, and the drummer will just like play all these metal objects in time with the track, and you get a sound like no one's put out before.
Have you ever had a moment where like another band or artist have listened to something that you've produced for another like artist,
Right.
and they're like, can you explain to me that how you've done that, or like can you explain that sound and where, like, what is it? Have you ever had that moment where it's like someone's just rushed you, like some other like artist is like just come in and be like, excuse me, can you like explain this, like I want this on my album? Have you ever had those kind of moments?
Yeah, quite a bit. You know, people have wanted you to do things and create things. And I mean, in my life, I find that it doesn't matter what studio you walk into, you've got a job to do, and so you work with what's in that room, and you find ways to make it work for you, and you got to get on with it. You know, you got one job: make the record sound great.
It's so funny, like speaking to you about this, and then again like referring to my friends when you watch them make an album, and it's I don't know, like every like producer and sound engineer is super professional. They're just like, it's like nothing is going on behind them, but everything's going on behind them. Do you know what I mean? They're just sitting there like, they're like, yeah, right. Like they're just so laser focused while chaos is just like just evolving around. I've always been so impressed by sound engineers and producers to be able to block that shit out and be like, yeah, right, this is what's going on. Like,
Yeah.
like nothing's happening, but everything's happening.
Yeah, right.
Because as I'm sure you've probably had moments like this happening all the time in the studio with all like the antics that you've come across from all different bands.
Shit going on behind you.
And you're just like, and to be so like, oh, it's all right. Like, this is my job.
Focus.
This is it.
Just
I'm fake.
zoom in, focus,
So,
and get your shit done.
so when did you migrate from London to America?
It was about probably around 1990, 91, I think. And living in London, I'd gotten to the same point where it was like living in Australia, and I kept on having the same bands come back around for second or third albums, and it's just like, fuck.
Yeah,
is
please.
this it?
Yeah.
Is this what I'm going to do for the rest of my life?
Same life question.
Yeah, and I got an offer of a job in the US to come and produce a small band there, and that project did pretty well.
Who was that small band? I feel like it's probably a big band.
No, it wasn't. It was some little New Jersey. Trying to remember their name. Anyways, New Jersey band.
Thought you were about to do like the old Sly Dog on me and be like, it's some small band.
Actually, their name was Trickster, and you would never have heard of them.
Motley Crue or something like what?
But it was, after 8 years of cloud that you could touch, from the ground in London, always grey, always gloomy. Excuse me. Drive past any bus stop in England and look at the faces on the people on the bus stop, and it sort of tells you what England is like. It's just
a cold
and
miserable place.
Yeah. And then, going to California and spending an extended period of time there, 4 or 5 months, it was just like, oh my God, feels like Australia again. Warm, sunshine, no clouds. Everyone's cool.
Because LA doesn't really have clouds, do they?
No,
it's just always like
really.
blue skies and hot.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, we have rain over there, but the rain usually lasts a week or two, and it's torrential for 2 weeks, and there's floods, and then it's gone. So the rest of the year is just sunshine.
But apparently the traffic there is terrible.
It's pretty bad.
I haven't been. I'm going to go, though. I'm going to go next year because I want to record with some people over there.
There's a freeway over there called the 101, and I used to call it my favorite parking lot. And this freeway is 6 lanes each way. So
Jam-packed,
not moving.
So I'm assuming you just probably lived right in the CBD and just walked everywhere.
No, I lived out in a place called Pacific Palisades. It was in between Santa Monica and Malibu, but up off the hill from the coast, at the top of the hill. But by that time I had 2 kids. I needed to get serious about the neighborhood I lived in. They needed to go to cool schools, not freaking
the classic artists, they got to go to the cool ones.
Well, not cool as in, when I say cool as in, I'm putting him in school for an education.
Yeah, not like the...
Yeah, I need to get serious here.
Yeah.
So I moved out to out to the Pacific Palisades. And, it was a beautiful little village, and, admittedly, it was one of those places when, you go into Starbucks in the morning and Ray Liotta's ordering a coffee and Julia Roberts is sitting over in the corner. But no one hassled him. Like, there were no press there. There were no...
Yeah, I've always wondered about that, that kind of celebrity lifestyle, if they're constantly always surrounded by paparazzi, or if there is moments where they're, like you just stated, that they just... Like, there's certain suburbs where they can just be themselves and not have people constantly harassing them.
I mean, my daughters went to school with, daughters and sons of really famous actors, and
You'd be like standing there picking your kids up, and Mark Wahlberg's just standing right next to you. Like, oh, yeah.
well, maybe not Wahlberg. I don't rate him.
I don't really know where. It was just the first one that popped in my head. I don't know. I don't know.
No, but it was kind of cool because you know, it was the kind of school where people get involved in their kids' educations, and they're all looking for the same thing I was. And, you know, so at like parent-teacher nights, or there'd be a play at the school that was put on. You know, all the parents would get involved, but it's a cool environment where, you know, probably everyone in that room knows who they are. Oh, that's Bruce Willis's kid. But no one hassled anyone, and
I think it's a weird, it's
you
like
could just walk around free, and you know, they loved it. They loved not being hassled. There's no one's coming up and give me your autograph. And
I feel like that's such an American thing too, like the whole autograph. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. I don't think Australia has like celebrities really. Like they do, but they don't have it on the scale of like America.
Scale.
You know,
Yeah.
like if you see Kylie Minogue, I'm sure you're gonna be like, oh my god, that's Kylie Minogue. Like you know who she is, but you're not like chasing her down the street kind of thing.
No, but I could walk into my local supermarkets, Whole Foods, and I'm looking at all the cheeses because they had a good stock of cheese in there. Let me tell you,
Love Tilba cheese, by the way. Actually,
yeah. Amazing, right?
I don't know. We're not going to shout out where you actually live, but we are in the location of the South Coast where my friend lives in Tilba. And if you haven't been there, get yourself there because the place is very cute to look at, but also their cheese, as we've just stated, is very amazing.
Incredible.
It's so delicious. I was like, I went in there today when I was like buying you the wine and stuff. I was like, I'll get him some cheese, but I'm not sure if he's like doesn't eat dairy and stuff. But I was like, I just went with the plum sauce instead.
That's where we do our cheese shopping over there.
Oh, I should have just got some. We could have had like a cheese platter.
This place, Whole Foods. I walk in there one day and I'm getting cheese and bread and stuff like that, and walk up to the cheese thing, and I'm picking up cheeses and reading the labels, and there's French cheeses and there's Swiss cheese and all kinds of stuff, and I'm reading the labels, and I get a tap on the shoulder. He goes, "Man, I've been looking at that cheese. It looks really good. Is it good?" I said, "Yeah, man, I eat it all the time. It's great. And it's Ray Liotta." We start having a 20-minute rave about cheese. We get done with the cheese, and it's like, okay, see you, Ray. James, right?
Isn't it? It's like a whole nother world, right? Like to the everyday person, they'd be like, oh my God. But like when you're in it, you're just like, oh,
it's
hey man,
normal.
like, okay, what's up? Like you're still the same.
And that's why everyone loved that neighborhood, because there was no, you know, not that I would, but, you know, for Michelle Pfeiffer's and all those people, they could walk around free. And
have you experienced that though? Like considering like a lot of people that like aspiring sound engineers and aspiring like people that obviously, did you ever experience like, I don't like, it's not something that I personally like to bring up in conversation, but it is kind of, I guess, because you are who you are and like the level that you're at, did you ever face any like kind of stuff, like people coming up to you going, oh my God, like dude, I love how you do this with your music and this, that, whatever?
I did it some of the trade shows, you know, because some of the trade shows for the products that I really liked, I would do an hour-long sit-in thing.
And talk about the product.
Talk about the product, talk about how you used it, ways to use it to your advantage. But, and I just got a gig, you know.
I know. Well, I know that, but like it's just it's funny too.
So I always gave people the time that they needed and explained things to them that they wanted to know. I mean, you'd be a dick if you're any other way, right?
That's what I think. Yeah. And even for me, like I'm not like I'm definitely not on the level that you were at the level, but like I've had people reach out and like send me messages and stuff, and I always respond and just like, hey man, like, I appreciate you for like same thing. I'm just like, I don't, you, me, we're all like everyone's the same. Like I'm
We're
no
all
different.
shit and piss, man.
We all do, yeah, like we all do the same thing, and it's. I think that whole ego thing is such a. I don't know. I just don't understand it because it's just not who I am. So
I did have one really, really funny situation. I was in one of those year-long lockouts at a studio in LA called the Enterprise, and
That's
I'm
a big
working
studio.
away. It was a big studio. They had like 5 rooms or something.
I think I've heard of that studio.
And I'm just sitting there working away, and usually there's 3 or 4 guys in my room at the same time that are all doing their jobs, editing something or preparing for the next day or something. And I hit stop at one point, and I thought, okay, probably time to roll a reefer. And I turn around, and there's this guy standing at the back of the studio with the studio manager, and he comes walking forward toward me, and there's this equipment rack between us, but he leans forward and goes, might as well say his name, Bob Ezrin, The Wall, and shakes my hand, and I was so taken aback by that. I couldn't believe it. To introduce yourself as Bob Ezrin, The Wall. Like, I recorded The Wall.
Yeah, that is
It's bizarre. Anyways, he left the room, and all of us in that room fell on the floor laughing. We couldn't believe that you would do that. Who the fuck is this guy? What?
It's so like.
Oh, God.
It's just like interesting to like go over, like to analyze and be like, there are people out there that do this kind of shit. You're like, so what is going on in your brain at the time, like that makes you, like even that other person we were chatting about, right? The one that you were like has a super big ego.
Yeah, right. Steve Perry.
That guy. Just name drop everyone. I mean, they're gonna hear it eventually because.
Yeah.
It'll be big enough that one day they'll be like, oh, I know that guy. And then they'll listen. They'll be like,
son of a bitch, cussed me out.
call me out. But yeah, it's just a fascinating thing, right? Like, I don't know. You can even talk about Kanye, to be honest. Like,
Right.
like his ego's, like his head's so far up his own ass right now. It's like,
God, the poor bugger.
it's like, man, that poor guy. Like, what is actually going on in his head? Like, what?
Mental illness.
Like when he wakes up, what is he thinking? Or what does his day look like for that bloke?
I think he looks straight in the mirror and goes, how do I look?
He's like, yeah, poor. Anyway.
I mean, the difference is that the people we work with have high profile careers, and our sole job is just to make their records sound fucking great. You know, we're not
But that's
pop
the most
stars,
important
and
part.
we're not anyone of note. We got a job.
I was chatting to my friend
Don't
about
fuck
this.
it up.
So a friend of mine loves music. Like
Right.
I reckon he'd have about 300 vinyls, which I mean that probably doesn't sound like a lot of vinyls, but if you know how expensive vinyls are, you know that's a lot. Like that's very
Big money.
So. And before I came on this podcast, I was like, hey, I've got this person coming on. This is who he is. And I sent him your website. And he was like, oh, man, this guy's worked with a lot of people. I was like, yeah. I was like, so what do you want to know? Like, what would you want to know if you were to talk to this guy? And he's like, and the same thing he just said. He's like, yeah. He's like, you don't ever really consider the person making the thing that gets them so big sound good. Because realistically... Yeah, you have to have talent to play in a band and make music, but someone is in that back room making it sound immaculate, and that's why people are listening to it. So it's like I don't know if there's like enough credit when it comes to like people like yourself that are actually the ones that are essentially making it sound amazing.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think there is. I'm more than happy with. I don't need to go out and find. People to piss up my ass with accolades.
Oh, not really like in that way. Just more of like it seems like there's so much more going on behind the scenes.
Right.
I don't know. Let's say like a good manager, for example.
Yeah, right.
Like they don't really get the accolades that they deserve just because it's just a funny dynamic and how it works. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, you choose that. I chose what I do. You know, I had a big nose, didn't have a chiseled jaw, sucked at the drums, but I knew what I wanted to hear out of a drum sound, or I knew what I wanted a band to sound like. And so I was more than happy just to, get over yourself, dude. It's never going to happen.
You learnt early on. You're like, well,
very early.
This is it.
Yeah. This chair's a good fit for me on the other side of the glass. And I zoned in, to be honest, and I put in the hard yard, and I really, really honed my expertise in audio, and I never settled, and I never got to a point where I thought, this is the best record you're going to make, because as far as I'm concerned, every album that you make, you walk away with a new set of skills in some way.
Yeah, you're like always leveling up to like the next thing.
Yeah, you're always learning something new. Holy shit, that worked really well. God, that sounds great. But I could never listen back to a record I just finished till probably a year later. I had to leave it a year, maybe. Only because all you do is listen to the things that could have been better, and you have no access to change that. It's out.
Once it's there, it's done.
Sold 3 million copies, and you can't change it. It's gone. So come back and listen in a year and see if you. And I found that a year, usually if a record was a hit, it made you feel a little better.
Yeah, I could only. I mean, like for me, for like a smaller scale, like you get an episode, and you go back through it, and you're like, man, I said some weird things that I probably would. Like you're like, oh, this is not good. This is not good. And you put it out there, and then I'm much the same as you. Like obviously, because I edit these now as well, I have to I hear I know what I'm saying, so it gives me a bit more freedom to if I do say something a little bit weird, I could probably kind of edit it out if I have to.
Right.
But even then, if you just, even as you watch the conversation just flow along, you're like, why did I ask the question in that way? Like, why didn't I just go straight to the point? And
Right.
So it's always like a self-critical thing. Did you, and going to your, I guess growing up, where did you grow up in Australia? Did you say Melbourne?
Yeah, in Melbourne.
And how did you find that in your time, your era? Because it's a very hard working era, I think. Even for my parents and stuff, the same. They're you wouldn't answer back to your teacher because they would cane you kind of situation,
right.
Which I always find super bizarre, by the way. But so how did you find, were you always interested in music? Were you listening to blues records or rock records, Elvis Presley kind of situation? Wait, when was he?
I think my the first record I bought was from a Golden Fleece service station, and it was Roy Orbison's "Pretty Woman," and I was probably 6 years old.
It is a tune.
Yeah,
I like that song.
And I played that thing till it wore out. So I've always been addicted to music. It's I think it's like a pleasant cancer. Once it moves into your body, there's no getting out.
Yeah, I feel the same, much the same, I guess. I listen to music. I reckon I would listen to music easily 5 hours a day.
Right.
And I'm not even doing what you're doing. I'm just listening to it for pleasure. And I'm but yeah, so what was your life kind of growing up? Were you just, what kind of jobs were you doing? Because I know a lot of kids, my stepdad, for example, he had to do he had a really weird, come from a country town. I remember when he told me, he's like, man, I used to get up at 3 a.m., milk the cows, get the chooks ready or something, and then do all these chores. And then he goes, then I'd have to ride to school 10Ks.
Right.
Then I'd ride back 10Ks. Then I'd go do the milk run. Then I'd go to bed, put the cows away, have dinner, go to bed. Like a real crazy, like, I was like, man, you try to get a kid to do that today. It's like,
Yeah, right.
So how was like your kind of upbringing in this?
I had a paper round. So I was up at like 5 o'clock every morning, go and deliver 300 or 400 newspapers. Come back home, get ready for school, except on Saturdays, which was the biggest paper round of the week because some people only got weekend newspapers. And then I'd come home and I'd go to work with my dad, who is he worked for Firestone Tires. He did like the beat of all the Firestone stores around Melbourne.
Like a sales run kind of thing?
It wasn't a sales run. He kind of managed.
Oh, yeah, okay.
He managed, however many Firestone stores there were in Melbourne. But on Saturdays, there were the days where you had to drive around to the mall and collect money or, check the books or whatever. So, and I loved being with him, and I'd do that. And it was a pretty simple, upbringing.
And how was your, like, because you got a very calm, nature about you. Like, you seem like you're very relaxed about a lot of things. So have you always, like, kind of been that way? Or has it kind of, like, just changed the older you've got kind of thing? Like,
No, I mean, I've had some episodes. I got, we had a local MP and his son, Peter Power, I went to school with. And we're in one of the back alleys around Canterbury one day, and this guy throws a brick at me. I'm with 3 of my friends, and I grabbed the brick, like I caught the brick that he threw at me. And he turns around to start running, and I hurled this brick, and it went over his head, and he ran into the brick. And I got charged with 13 counts of assault.
13?
Yeah, over that one brick. So anyways, it was kind of a nothing thing, but, I didn't have many episodes.
Many moments that you can, like, recall. That you're like,
that was one.
And how, like, and then, like, moving forward, like, to what you do now, like, and you're dealing with bands and different personalities, you would have never really faced that. Like, you would have just stayed, you never had any episodes where you're like, man, can you just, like, kind of pull your head in a little bit? Like, you've been a bit ridiculous?
No, I mean, at worst, I'll just say, you know what, guys, I'm leaving now. I'll see you tomorrow morning. 11 o'clock start, be here. And I just walk away from it and let them work it out, what they'd fucking done to piss me off.
I feel like it's one of those things, like, you never want to piss the cook off. You never want to piss the sound engineer off, Like, it's like they are the make or break for you at this point.
Yeah, right. A little extra chili in your mix.
Yeah. Oh, that's okay. I'll just turn your drum set down. Don't worry about it.
No, it never got like that because it's always, it's a group effort. My reputation depends on it as much as theirs.
Yeah.
So.
And do you ever feel that kind of pressure? Like when you've built, because now you've got this, I would assume, like you do have quite a good reputation. Do you ever feel pressure? I'm going to say you don't because you seem like a very calm.
I don't feel pressure.
I feel like you just go in there and must just do.
Yeah. I mean, I have felt pressure toward the end of projects when you're told that there's no more money left and you've got to mix 12 songs and you've got 8 days to do it or something like that. I mean, on a few occasions, I've bought the extra days myself. I've paid for those days just to make sure that the level of what we're putting out
stays the same.
It's consistent.
And I guess, even talking about that kind of thing now, like with royalties and stuff, we were talking about this before, but how did How did that like kind of affect you, I guess, in that industry? Because you do make royalties off an album,
Yeah,
to a degree.
I made royalties pretty much off everything I worked on. But you earn royalties when you're in a creative position on the thing, producing and doing all of that, and when you are, making visibly obvious changes to the music and taking it to a new level other than what it was, you get paid royalties. But will honestly say I've never taken songwriting off any band ever. Even when I've come up with a hook line on the chorus, or I've changed lyrics or changed chords, or I've never taken a songwriting credit and taken money off the band on that level, because that's their money as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I've never really.
Yeah.
Is there any, I don't know if you want to talk about it, but like, is there any song that that you've like changed a chorus or something that has done so well and you're like, this could have been. Like,
no, I don't look back.
Or not as in like a regretful, but like you just like, oh, that's me. Like I did that.
Yeah, and I feel good about it. But it's a work ethic, and I, maybe they didn't write the chorus, maybe they had help. Maybe we changed the chords, maybe we rewrote the lyrics or changed the melody and made the melody different. But I've just always, maybe it's the Catholic in me, I've always felt that that's their kind of part of the action, and I don't have a right to step in and say, well, I'm taking your songwriting.
Yeah, it's kind of like the I don't know, like the old mentality of like, I'll buy you a drink, it'll come around kind of thing. Like you don't want anything from me, like, because like the come around for you would probably be like, yeah, this dude is super, really, really good at his job.
Yeah, but
and then like through word of mouth of like all these bands talking about you, like that's the kickback. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, maybe it is. I've never thought about it like that, but I just didn't feel it was my, my place to step up and say, it doesn't matter how much you did on songs. It's, look, to be honest, there are some songs that I pretty much wrote the whole song, but I always thought that's their thing, that's theirs, that's not mine.
Do other sound engineers take credit?
Huge.
Yeah, right. I've never really. I've
come across guys that, change "and" to "the" and take a songwriting credit. And songwriting credit is, you get paid for every play on the radio. You get paid for.
So like you can really actually make a lot of money if you take some type of songwriting credit.
Yeah.
Because I know Ed Sheeran has written songs for like Justin Bieber,
right,
and things like that. Yeah. And I'm sure he's copping it.
Oh no, he'll get. That's a co-write or whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I don't know, but I got a feeling that Justin Bieber's not writing too much of that song, and it's pretty much Ed Sheeran.
I think he wrote. Yeah, Ed Sheeran wrote the whole song.
Yeah.
I don't think he wrote any of it.
Yeah.
I feel like, and in this day and age, it seems like everyone's getting songs written for him.
Well, it kind of started back with around the Madonna period, where people that never wrote songs were saying, and she was massive. If you want a track on my album, I've got 50% writers on your song. And these poor bastards sitting in their living rooms in Manhattan going, fuck, I could be on a Madonna album. Could be the ticket out of here.
It's such a good marketing ploy, right?
Yeah. And so they'd have to give up 50% of their writers on just to get on her album. But
have you ever like met her in person?
Madonna only once.
She seems like I always get mixed views on what she would be as a person. I'm like, is she nice or is she like up herself or is she like, what's going on there? Because it seems like she's got a lot of creative.
It was about 2 or 3 minutes, and it was not
Very short, like
wasn't deep.
yeah, okay,
And
surface
she
level,
was
like
just
hey,
being,
hello.
striker pose. So,
Is there anyone that you've met that's like super memorable? Like where you're like, man, this guy's like legit. Like just, I know we're talking about Corey from Slipknot. Great band, by the way. Really like their stuff. But I remember you were chatting about him being like really authentic and a nice person.
yeah, he really is.
Is
I've got to be honest with, I can pick up a phone and put a call into almost everyone I've ever worked with.
and they'd be like, yeah, man, what's up? Like that.
Jimbo, dude, what are you doing?
I do. Yeah, there was a story. I mean, Tash told me a story about like you gave a number to her, and the person who was on the other end of the phone, she was like, he didn't tell me who it was, and then when I found out who it was, she was like, you know, you could have like pre-warned me kind of thing. She's like, I was like, oh yeah, because when it was funny like how this all came about. When like she's like, oh, you know, my uncle does this, that, and I was like, oh yeah. And then she's like, no, like he's like kind of a big deal kind of thing. I was like, what do you mean? She's like, he's like, oh, work with these people, rah, rah, rah. And I was like, what the fuck? I was like, what do you mean? She's like, yeah. I was like, oh my God. Like, it's just, I find like that moment is so surreal. Like, it's such a weird, because you just never know who someone knows. Or like the thing with like the Phil Collins thing. It's like, you never knew that's how that sound came about.
I didn't even know what it was going to be used for.
Yeah.
I want a drum sound that's bigger and badder than anything you've ever heard. And that was what I came up with.
It's like, it's these moments in life for me that I'd never take for granted. You're like, man, you just, because I like to think, for me personally, as a human, I'm such a curious, intrigued person about life in general. So I always like to have conversations with like people like yourself or just anyone, and you just never know what's going to come out in the conversation. Like, you're like, oh man, like I just never thought about it like that.
Yeah, right.
And you always leave feeling like man, that was a nice conversation, you know, like. And I think that's something really rare as well in life. It's really rare to have nice, genuine, deep, like thought-provoking conversations where you're like, shit, I actually feel good about leaving that. But I'm sure you faced many.
It was kind of funny, actually, because sometimes, like I didn't always just do albums. Sometimes I'd do singles for people. And, I'd be off for 3 weeks or something and say to the family, okay, let's get out of town. We'll go up north. We'll go to Santa Barbara or somewhere up there just for a few days off. We'd be driving along in the car and a song would come on the radio. And I'd be listening and I'd say, God, I know this song. What is this? I wonder what this is. I know this song. And my daughters are in the back seat laughing their asses off, going, Dad, you idiot.
You made this song.
You did this song. Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, like I'm sure you must have made like so many songs. Like as in like you've engineered so many songs.
Right.
Like you must forget. Like as you just stated, like you must.
No, you do. You do forget. It's obviously the more creatively challenging ones are the ones that kind of stick in your psyche, I think, where you've got to go above and beyond the call of duty, and particularly those moments where you do that and you're rewarded by massive sales, and so those stick in your head. The Eric Clapton one for me was pretty special. The Unplugged thing we had, I think it was 3 or 4 weeks to get the whole thing together. And the mobile truck that MTV hired, because it was in England, wasn't big enough for what we needed. So I had to hire in a console and use the console in the truck to record the stuff to Pro Tools, and then use another console to mix it out for broadcast that went back to New York. But it was, for me, the musicians on that project were people that I'd grown up adoring. And I kind of, I got there on day one and walked in the room and saw who was there, and I felt like a fake.
Like imposter syndrome.
Yeah. What are you doing here? What? Oh my God, that's the average white band drummer. Oh my God. And keyboard player from Little Feat. And just all these bands that I'd grown up with as a teenager, loving. I mean, I wore out 3 copies of Waiting for Columbus by Little Feat on vinyl. And it's a double album. So to walk in a room and see Bill Payne at the keyboards. What's wrong here? Something's wrong with this. And it turned out it was amazing, an amazing project all round. I had the best fun. The guys were so incredibly nice and generous. And, you know, Eric was a little bad-tempered when his tea was cold, but for the most part he was great. And the thing sold 27 million copies, and I now have the status of recording the largest selling album in human history. And it can't be taken away because no one buys CDs anymore.
That's crazy.
It's insane, right? But it was a really, really fun album to make. I even went down to like Home Depot and bought timber, and I hand-built a beatbox that Eric could have in front of him. So when he stomped his feet, there was a microphone stuck under the box, and
that's crazy.
I recorded the microphone so you could actually hear the bump stomp on the box. But it was so relaxed, and those musicians were some of the most admired people I'd listened to during my teenage years. So I felt like I was at the pearly gates. Oh my God, imposter syndrome. What am I doing here? So that was great. Ed, the keyboard player from Split Enz.
Yeah.
And it was really, really nice to see him. And it's funny because the last drummer in Split Enz I went to high school with. And we used to share drum kits. So there was a pretty close association. And during that last Split Enz record, I think it was called See You Round, if I'm not mistaken. But Crowded House were already we were doing demos for Crowded House while we were working on the last Split Enz record.
That's wild, hey.
Yeah, that's wild.
With the Men at Work song Down Under,
Right.
what's your take on that song?
Do you come from the land down under?
Do you like it?
Yeah, but I mean, I was on the recording of it, and I never heard Kookaburra sits on the whole gum tree. I didn't hear it. I just didn't even pick it up. So I don't know.
What music inspires you? Like, what music out of all the genres that you have recorded, and like, what do you actually like to listen to?
One of my favorite albums at the moment is...
I have not seen a CD in so long.
It's the old Prince album, and it was the last album that Prince made for Sony, and I think it's called All Friends for Sale. But the production on this record, and I never got into it back when he released it. I've recently listened to it, and it blows my mind how talented this guy was. He's so incredibly talented. And I kind of, I don't know why. I always like Prince, released hits or whatever on the radio, but this record, I can't stop listening to it. It's astounding in every way. And it's called All Friends for Sale. Sony Records, Tommy Mottola.
What is it specifically that you find so that you're just like, man, like there's something about this?
The genius of his songwriting and just how he's put this thing together. I mean, like I said, Sal turned me on to this, so I hadn't. Sally's my wife, by the way. Sally turned me on to this, and I just thought, oh God, fucking Prince, great.
Just another Prince fan.
Oh, fucking Prince. And I put the record on, and it fucking blew my mind. It's such an amazing record. It's such an amazing record.
You might need to bring yourself closer to the.
So, anyways, it reintroduced me to Prince outside of my, early Prince,
Did you ever get to meet him?
1999. No, I never did. But I did work with his keyboard player. His keyboard player became kind of ensconced in my business partner, JJ Farris, in LA. And he came in to work on something for us, and he was just phenomenal. And obviously, working for Prince for years, he parlayed all these stories that, working with Prince was. And he was, the one story in particular that I remember is that we were working, it was like a film trailer for, I think it was Born Identity or something like that. And yeah, it was Born Identity. And this guy, Kip, who was his old keyboard player, comes up to the keyboard and stands at the back of it and plays it backwards, but perfectly.
What?
Standing the other way around. And I said, dude, how did you do that? And he told me this story that they were in rehearsals for a Prince tour, and Prince looked at him and said, "You're playing that wrong. That's not the way it goes." And Kip said, "No, it's the way it goes." And man, I studied it all night last night. I worked it out. I know that it's played like this. And Prince walked up to his keyboard and stood over it backwards and played the riff backwards over a keyboard. And I'm just,
what?
How the hell do you do that? What? And Kip said, yes, from that day on, I learned how to play keyboards backwards and forwards.
I guess that is like the perfect story to like explain how, I guess, profound and individual this guy was, like on the level that he was at. Because there's not many people that I like, you hear stories of people going, oh my God, these people are so crazy, right? But I reckon him in his own right was like, he was just on another, like he was just somewhere else. Like he was just way off in the stratosphere, you know?
Yeah.
Like no one even came close to how good
even the fact that he died in his own complex and no one knew about it until 11 o'clock the next morning is astounding. he'd stayed there all night. I wasn't going to. It's not worth getting into the
Why?
the hows or the whys or the what fors, but just the fact that he was the only guy in his complex all night long, still working. I was working at this studio in. So yes, I did meet Prince. Actually, I'd forgotten about that. I was working at this studio in LA called the Record Plant, which is where I've still got the hat from.
Love it. So good.
And Prince was booked in at midnight, and he turned up at about 1 o'clock in the morning, and he walked out of there at 8 o'clock the next morning with 7 songs, completely written, demoed, ready to go. And I just thought to myself, wow. And the assistant on the project, I said to him, God, man, can you just play me a couple of bars of a few songs? So he dragged us into the room and played us a few things, and it was just insane. And now that I've hooked up with this song, this album, some of those ideas that I heard that he tracked are on this album.
What?
Yeah. But the guy was a genius. Freaking genius. And you can't find it anywhere. Like, if you look online, it's not available.
This album?
Yeah. It's not available. It was him partying with Sony Records and Tommy Mottola. And it was the big finger for Sony Records. And it was, he titled it Friends for Sale. Amazing album. I'll play it to you before we go.
Yeah, before, sucked in everyone else, because it's pretty rare, right?
Big band, it's all kinds of different things that he never did before. It's a whole new genre of music for him.
Yeah, I don't really know anyone else that's kind of even in his league, right?
No.
There are other people, like, even, I don't know, some people say Michael Jackson was pretty
Yeah.
Like, I remember I watched a doco on him, and I can't remember, he was like, I'm going to bring out, I can't remember what album it was, but he's like, I'm going to bring out this album, and every single song is going to hit number 1. And he literally brought the album out, and every single song hit number 1.
Number 1.
I was like, that is insane. Like, that, but it's so different in this day and age, because it's not a thing anymore, really. Like, because everything is consumerism. It's so fast. It's like songs are coming out left, right, and center.
Yeah, right.
It's not hard. Like I think that's the reason why Metallica and all those bands have stuck around for so long, is because when they came out, they were in the era of like everything wasn't like, you didn't consume it the way that we consume things now. Like, so it was, and you had to work a lot hard. Not saying they don't work hard now, but it seemed like they had to work really hard to be so individual that they would be like timeless, if to a degree, if that makes sense.
Well, they had to build their fan base as well. It was all about fan base, and now people are releasing a song a month or whatever.
Yeah, I got friends that release stuff all the time.
Yeah.
Like in terms of like building that fan base, what type of people would you say are Motley Crue's fan base? Because I know you've worked with them as well.
I don't know.
Because they seem to be like a crazy bunch of people.
I don't know.
And
I got to be honest, after I finished albums, I'd move on.
Oh, I just mean like the fan base of them, in terms of like, because like if you see like Metallica's fan base, you can kind of tell what they're like. You can, they're real like, yeah. But then you get like Kiss's fan base. They're very like, because they're the very glam metal kind of thing.
Right.
They're like, woo, like here we go, like. But then Motley Crue's fan base seemed to be just a bunch of misfits that. Do you know what I mean? Like that's the vibe I get from like
just
that.
Did too many drugs.
Just like crazy.
And never changed.
It's like, where are you pulling these people from? Like where are these people coming out of the woodworks?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's just it's just a fascinating like
I've never locked into a genre of music that I couldn't leave.
Yeah,
I
you
always
have
moved on.
molded yourself
Always
to that
moved
genre.
on.
kinda.
Always moved on. You know, I don't wear their clothes. I don't wear their shit. I don't, sit there and go, fucking A, man.
yeah, I'm very fluid between. Do you like hip hop?
I'm not a huge fan of it. I did my first hip hop experience was with a guy called Ice-T.
Which is huge in hip hop
Right.
world.
And I did this song for him called 9mm.
Yeah, it's a big song too.
Was it really?
Pretty sure 9mm from Ice-T was a big. Yeah.
Wow. Anyway,
Ice-T is like a very prominent hip hop artist
Right.
in the early
Yeah.
like 90s.
Yeah. So I got this. I'd never done hip hop, and this guy at this Warner Records label said, "Dude, you should mix this. It needs, big sound. It needs to be bigger than what hip hop is." And I said, "Okay." And I got this song called 9mm, and the chorus was, "Listen to my 9mm go bang." And so I thought, oh yeah, I'll put an echo on that and make it go bang, 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 bang. And he came in to listen to it and fucking freaked out because the bang, 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 bang. He loved it. And but during the mixing of that record, I was extremely disturbed by the fact that his manager kept describing about this Saturday they were watching Scarface, and Ice-T, he had a slug in his chest plate.
Yeah, right.
And he was told that it could never be removed, and he had like a Bowie knife and dug the fucking slug out of his chest plate during this movie, watching this movie. And I just thought, that's nice. I don't think I want to be involved with these people. I don't want to. It wasn't my thing. But, having said that, 8 months later, I'm working in a studio called Track Record over in the Valley in LA. And Suge Knight moved into the studio next door.
Sure. He is a very prominent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And man, I spent there's a long hallway to get to the bathroom. And Suge's crowd was always like 40 people. And the whole hallway is lined with gold and platinum records. And all these guys, you just know they're packing heat. And so to go to the bathroom was like a daunting experience.
You're walking past a war zone, you're like,
Yeah,
hey,
and
shit.
they don't move. Like when you've got to dodge around them and go, excuse me, excuse me, excuse me. So anyways, long story, I don't know if it's going to be short.
That's the fuck, if you could. That's the best thing. Like if you could say in any conversation, long story, I don't know if it's going to be short. If you just start with that, people are like, shit, perfect.
But anyways, I was working on a Metallica project at the time in the studio down the hallway that was a long way from the toilet. And I had a call into my studio one night from his assistant and said, "Would you mind if Suge comes in and talks to you?" And I said, "No, of course not. Great, bring him in." So Suge comes in, sits down, introduces himself, a couple of spliffs, and he says, "Man, I'm thinking about opening this faction of my record label called Rock Row instead of Death Row, Rock Row." And he said the only difference is that the guy in the Rock Row thing will be holding a Les Paul and playing guitar, but still in the electric chair and the whole thing. And I've got this band that I think might be the first band we sign. And the shit that I hear coming out of your studio is fucking astounding. It's huge. It's a huge rock sound, and we want that rock sound. do you think you would be interested in cutting some demos with my band? Like on the weekend, on your days off, I'll, obviously pay you for it and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, wow, Suge Knight, me, little white boy from Australia.
What's up? Yeah.
Yeah, right. So I said, yeah, man, of course I will. And so went on, introduced to the band, got a weekend slot a couple of weeks later in my timetable, and the band came in, and he only wanted 3 songs, but we cut 10 tracks, like an album's worth of tracks, overdubs, the whole thing. So when it got back to him, it was, freaking woo.
He was like, oh, this is
He
crazy.
got an album. So he got a copy of it, and the next time he came in my room, he didn't ask. He just walked in, and I got the big bear hug. And
That's crazy.
Jimbo, you're a fucking nutcase. You're a fucking nutcase. You fucking Aussie. You Aussie.
Isn't it crazy how they express themselves?
Yeah.
Like how they express that.
Right.
Like if that was in Australia, they're like, oh, fucking good job, mate. Like, great bloody job. But they're like, you're so, like in America, everything's so amplified. Oh, this is the craziest thing ever. Like, rah, rah. You're just like, man, it's like so like full on in your face.
Anyways, he was really happy. And after that night, when he'd come into my room, I said to him, man, I got to pee. And he goes, yeah, me too. And so we're walking down the hallway, the Gold Record hallway where all the bros are. And it was like the parting of the Red Sea. And Suge's got his arm around me. And we're walking down this hallway. And he opens the toilet door and says, you go first, man. And turns around to all these guys and says, Jimbo's my fucking man. Jimbo's my fucking man. And I got to say, man, I went and peed, and I'm sitting there thinking, oh, maybe I'll get shot when I walk out here.
Just walk out 9 mils. Shit.
But I came out of the bathroom, and it was like the parting of the fucking Red Sea. And I never had another problem. Every time I went to the bathroom, all these brothers with their frickin' guns would part and let me through. I didn't have to dodge anyone. I didn't have to do anything. Unfortunately, the record, the division of the record label never came to fruition because Suge got himself involved in other kinds of things.
Knocking people off. Probably not the greatest. He's a dangerous kind of guy. I think he's a dangerous.
Don't fuck with Suge, but all I can say is he was, to me, he was a gentle, kind man, and looked for my help. I gave him my help, and in return, he treated me like a very special person.
And that's all you can ask for, right?
Yeah.
Like, because this is the thing that I find is so crazy. And like, people are like, oh, why would you talk to this person? And it's like, man, if someone shows you respect and just treats you and shows you admiration or whatever, what are you going to do? You're going to turn around and be like, oh no, like,
no,
what? It's like you treat.
He was really cool.
And that's all you can, like that, and those memories, like you just, like that's obviously a core memory for you to like remember. So you're always gonna, like, regardless of whatever he's in trouble for,
just the,
you're like, oh man, this guy's still like
walking down a hallway with his, because he's massive,
he's huge too. He looks like a big bloke
with his arm around my shoulder, showed all of his peeps, do not fuck with my boy.
Little white boy from Australia. He's just like, yes,
from fucking Melbourne, Australia. I mean,
yeah, it's crazy. A
couple of weeks later, the whole Tupac thing went down, and that was really, really sad because he was working with Tupac at the time.
Yeah, it's a really controversial. I don't know how much you know about it. It's a very.
I know a lot about
it's
it.
a very controversial.
I was working in the same studio.
Yeah, the story behind it's quite controversial as to who planned it or who got knocked off and stuff. I'm not going to even touch on that because I don't know enough about it. But
and I won't either.
Nah, it's something that it's like I don't know enough about, so I won't comment. But yeah, it's pretty. Even the whole Biggie situation, like all same. Like and they were both like so prominent in hip hop. It's just a wild time.
Yeah, I know. And as I say, I didn't really get into hip hop outside of Ice-T, so I don't know the inner workings of it. But all I know is that I befriended Suge, and he was so cool to me, and Tupac was also really, really, really nice guy.
Oh, so you met him as well? He seems like he did seem like a really nice. He seemed like very, like a real deep thinker. Like he was constantly like analyzing and like really like trying to progress and move forward as just like a human. You know, like he was it. From what I've seen, like obviously I've never met the person, but like obviously you know him, like know him as in like you've cut. I'm sure you've
hung out in the same studio.
Yeah, same kind of thing. But
see him around, and you know, he knew that he was free to walk into our little thing, and
yeah, it seemed like he just like from the interviews and stuff that I watched his documentaries, it seemed like he was very, like just a very profound, like deep thinker. Like he was constantly trying to help the world and make it a better place. Yeah, they did. I've seen that. Like people are like, yeah, dude, he was like really intense. Like he was very like demanding of. Like, you're like, oh, fair enough. Like that's cool. Like it's just, yeah.
It's funny. My assistant at the time, Patrick Thrasher, who is now into country music in Nashville of all places, but Patty's a beautiful guy. Hey, Patty.
Shout out, Patty. Come on the show.
Patty got invited to go do some vocals on one of Suge's sessions, and it was Tupac. And Patty, before he left, because I was self-sufficient, Patty said, man, I don't know what I'm going to do on this. I don't know anything about this kind of music. I said, dude, you'll be fine. Just do what you're doing here. Off you go.
Same.
Go do it. Go do it. So he goes in there, and Patty's recording vocals, and Tupac's like, no, man, stop. You know, back up. I want to punch in it, you know, just after that line. And the next line was nigger with an attitude. And Patrick's like this long-haired, you know, Alabama southern white boy that's surrounded by 40 black guys. And he goes, should I punch in before the word nigger? And the whole room exploded into laughter. They just all cracked up. It was like a big hug for him.
Yeah, because it's like imagine,
like
imagine that experience.
Yeah, Alabama, fucking white bread.
You're like,
on a hip hop session.
Like you're sitting in there with like the most baddest humans ever, like these thugs, and then you're like, I don't even know if I can say the word. Like,
right?
Where you want me to? Like it'd be the most awkward thing to be like, where am I supposed to come in again? Like,
yeah, right.
Like, dude,
should I punch in before?
Yeah, like, dude, just say the word. You're like, oh, okay, all right, fair enough. Like,
but fortunately, it worked out really well for him, and they loved him for just being up front.
Yeah, just being like like being authentic. It's like, dude, it's like you're in an environment that's way out of your league. Like, you're a country music.
And they knew it.
It was like these people.
That's why they
selling drugs on the corner, right?
Yeah.
Like. You're this little hillbilly from down south, and they're just like, bro, what are you doing here? It sounds like you've just had, like you've got the most amazing story. Like you just seem to know, like have lived a life. Have you ever like gone back, or like even now, and just sitting on your deck, I know, smoking a doobie, or have you ever just sort of like reflected on the life that you've lived and gone like, man, like what a ride?
No. I mean, I remember it all and I love it all. But like I said, I can pick up my phone. I can call anyone I've ever worked with.
Oh, and just more so not
and
like
I
with
know that they will take the call. It'll be like, dude, what you doing?
Oh yeah, no, not necessarily like in the celebrity. I just mean like overall, like as a career wise. Have you ever just been like, man, like what a sick, what a like hectic time. Like, well, how much fun has this been? You know, from like going being in Melbourne
Yeah, right.
and like starting out like with one of the, like what you've said, like one of the most like amazing sound engineers that you've ever worked with has taught you the best foundations to now like living this career. And then you're just sitting there, and now we're here on the South Coast.
Wow.
You're just like, man, what a buzz. What a buzz.
I don't know, man. I was out painting skirting boards this morning from my laundry.
That's what I mean. Like, it's like the polar opposites to like this crazy like existence of like. Well, I mean, to be fair, you're still doing it. Like, you're not. Mind you, you can't see this on camera, but he still has his studio set up. He's just now the cool bedroom producer.
Yeah.
Just still running amok.
I got my Rob Thomas on here, by the way, over on the side, which is playing on HBO sometime this month. So I'm not out, at this point in my career, I'm not out looking for the latest and the greatest, but I have a fairly stalwart group of friends that I will always work for, and one of them being Rob or Matchbox 20 or whatever you want to call them.
I don't even know they were still a thing.
Yeah, they're still going.
Still kicking.
Still kicking. So I've got old friends like that I will still work with. These guys I still work with. I did a couple of compilations with Eric Clapton.
Where's that guy?
There he is.
Oh, here he is.
There he is. And there's the Matchbox 20 up here. So this, I'm not out looking for new acts to work with. I'm more than happy with growing old and, doing shit with my old buddies. And I'm still.
Yeah, you've lived a life, that's for sure. Like, it's such a, because not many people get to live this kind of life also, like it is a very unique industry to be working in, like working in a sound engineering kind of.
Yeah, but I had to, it's not by chance or it's not by luck. I worked really, really hard to get to a level of people that I wanted to work with. It was a hard job. It wasn't, smooth sailing. It wasn't like, hey, man, come on in,
Start calling all the big names.
No. I had to, I really mastered my craft. And the reason I got these gigs is because I mastered my craft and I became, it sounds like a wanker, but I became really, really good at it. And it was a life focus of mine. And I worked hard to get to that point.
Can I ask one thing?
Yeah.
Where did you get the name The Surgeon?
Because...
Did you give that to yourself, or was this someone give this to you?
No, it was... I'm not even going to tell you who it was, but it was a guy that I worked on a project with. And he said, man, it doesn't matter how crappy our fucking recordings are. You're like a surgeon. You're the music surgeon. By the time we come back in the morning, it's beautiful. And I don't know how the fuck you do that, but you're a music surgeon.
That's the best. It's so good. Because I was reading, I was like, man, where did he get this from? I was like, I doubt he would have given it to himself. I was like, surely it's come from somewhere.
Well, and on that particular project, it was music surgeon because there wasn't a high counter of talent on the project. But, obviously I was able to edit and, fix shit up and make it sound great. And they'd come back in the morning and go, "Oh my God, is that us? How do you do that?"
Have you ever, like, as you were saying, like, you've worked really hard. Has there ever been moments in your career where you were kind of like, fuck, I don't even know if I want to be, like, I don't, like the whole imposter syndrome. You're like, shit, like, am I actually as good as what these people are, like, blowing wind up my ass kind of situation? Have you ever just, like, kind of gone, oh, maybe I don't really want to, like, you kind of wanted to exit because you're like, shit, I actually don't know if I am, you know, like those low points?
I got to a point where I realized I can actually do all this shit. I got to a point where I had confidence in myself to know that you could throw anything at me and I'll fucking make it happen. Anything. Doesn't matter what it is, I'll do it. I mean, I went on to doing freaking trailers. We did, the 3 Born movie trailers.
Which is like one of the greatest. I think it's one of the. I've never seen it, but I know that it's like one of the greatest like set of movie, like the series of movies of like all time.
Yeah,
which is crazy. Even the Spider-Man, like I see the Spider-Man plaque up there.
Right.
I mean, you got quite a few plaques kicking around here.
Well, it's funny because I actually got rid of about 300 of them, and I kept, I guess, the ones that meant more to me than.
Yeah, I was gonna say because like kind of like they are obviously they're a bit like not like materialistic, but they are like a kind of like a memento. So like, how do you?
Sally and I call this the wank room.
That's the best.
I've never ever hung gold records in any of my houses that I've ever lived in. I've never done it. They've always been in storage. And then when I was moving back to Australia, I just thought, why do I want to transport 300 fucking gold records? Half of them I don't remember. Why do I want to transport them back? So I picked a small selection and thought, okay.
I'll say the Spider-Man one and the Rush one looked the best, just because I'm a visually kind of human.
Well, the Matchbox 20 one I kept because...
that's pretty cool, actually.
Michael Gudinski and I were very, very close friends for many years. And he released that one, so I kept that.
Are they actually... This is another thing. Are they actually gold?
No, it's bullshit.
Come on, guys.
I know, it's fucking ridiculous.
Bro, you're going to...
Like, if you look at a record, like, I look at some of these records, and there's only 4 songs on one side. But you look at the gold thing that you get, and there's like 6 tracks on it. It's like, what are you kidding me?
What's this one? I've never even heard it. Don't know that one.
Yeah, so anyways, I just think, this is the very first time in my life that I've actually
put something up. You're like,
a gold record. And I figured, okay, Sal and I decided that this would be the studio room, and I can close the door and do my little wank fest. But sometimes I walk in and think, oh God, I'd rather put artwork up.
It's just so it's so crazy, like you were saying before, you like live this life, and then this morning you're out there painting the deck.
Yeah.
Like, and that's what it shows, like, realistically. It's like these people that put others on this pedestal. I'm like, mate, they're still doing the same shit as you're doing. Like, the lawn's still got to get mowed.
It's called life.
Yeah, like,
we got to pee, we got to shit, we got to mow the lawn.
Yeah, it's
life.
But it has. Yeah.
But I am very, very, very thankful for the people that invited me into their lives and invited me into sharing, their perspective on what they wanted to do and the trust that they gave me. And, I guess clearly I delivered the trust that they put into me.
Yeah. Of course, you've definitely made an impact in the world, whether people knew about it or they didn't know about it. But realistically, the ones that knew about it were the ones that were creating the music, and they knew that your talents and your expertise were needed. Otherwise, they wouldn't have got where they were sonically without it. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, for sure.
and like that's important. Like
yeah, but I met some beautiful people, and I also, I think, what I've gotten out of all of this is that I've heard people criticize a lot of the people I've worked with for their egos or whatever, but from my side, my perspective, they're nothing more than creative people that were pursuing a goal. And I was more than gratified to be a part of their choice in pursuing that. It was great. It was fantastic. Great people. And really normal. I mean, the biggest stars are the most normal people. And we got on that level. I was down to earth. They were down to earth. And it's that mutual trust, you know, that they know they have in you. It's just a mutual trust. They know you're going to do the right thing by them.
it's like, yeah, I mean, that is the perfect way to bring this to a close. Now, this is not going to be the last episode because I've been captivated this whole entire episode, and I've been like, we could sit here for, mind you, I want to let people know we've been stopping every 20 minutes, and in between the 20 minutes, we've been having about another 20-minute conversation outside of this. So this is like, this has been going on since I've been here since 2:30. It's now like, well, what is the time?
Oh God, it's 7:30.
There you go, 7:30. So we've been engaging and conversing, and I've been having the most, like, the best time. This is one of my, this is amazing for me personally. I hope you've had a good time as well.
Oh, Jesse, I've had a great time, man. Just cut out all the bad shit.
We're just going to chop out all the... You haven't said anything bad, so it's fine.
And if they're not dead, get rid of it.
Just cut it out. But before we get out of here, there's two things that we like to do. I don't know why I say we, because it's always me and I'm the only one running the project. But there's two things that I like to do. You get a shout out, a local, or in your case, an international legend that you think should come on the show and tell their story. And secondly, you get to give a piece of advice that maybe someone gave to you in your career that you think might help someone else trying to chase their goals.
Okay. The first one would be Manny Marroquin, who I mentioned outside, who's done everybody in the R&B world. And Manny's very special to me because when I first met him, he was a food runner, and he's now an international superstar. So I feel very, very proud of Manny. He's one of the biggest mixers in the world. Another one would be Doug Brady, who is a Melbourne-based engineer that went on, after working as my assistant also, went on to record the famous John Farnham, You're the Voice.
Classic Australian song that everyone sings at the pub.
He did the whole album. And I would love to thank Roger Savage, who taught me and probably didn't just teach me audio, he taught me how to hand on the gift.
That's amazing.
And I did. And of course my buddy Patrick Thrasher, extraordinaire country guy in Nashville, Tennessee, and Shawnee Mack, another one of my underlings in LA that is now gone on to be massive indie producer on the East Coast. I had a gifted life. I worked hard, had a gifted life.
And I think that's the best. Like, you can't. Oh, wait, we forgot you get to give one piece of advice to someone who you think, like, someone might be listening to this right now going, man, and they're really struggling with their creative project, and you get to give one bit of advice that maybe someone gave to you that really, like, you're like, shit, this, like, I can resonate with this.
Don't ever give up your dream. Keep working. And if you're serious, if you're really, really serious, it'll come to you, because you're going to get better every time you do something. And keep doing tracks, keep cutting tracks. Every single time you cut a track, it's going to get better and better and better. And hang in there. If you're serious, keep doing it. You'll find your purpose, you'll find your fulfillment, and you'll find your life.
Boom. You nailed it, Jim. Thank you so much for coming on. Guys, this has been another amazing episode of Creative Appetite. If you don't want this to be the last episode, by the way, I don't normally say this, but I'm going to get him on anyway. But if you found fulfillment in this, please comment, send me a message, tell me what's going on. Please like, subscribe, share, tell your grandma about it. And most of all, hang around for the next one. Thank you.